Why did God put a man in the mouth of a snake and still save him at the end? This is the story of Apostle Paul, a man whose journey was filled with pressure, resistance, danger, and moments that looked like the end. Yet somehow, the end never came. Before the snake, before the island, before the fire, there was a storm. And not just any storm, but the kind that erases direction, the kind that silences confidence, the kind that makes even experienced men feel small. The sky turned dark without warning, clouds folding over the light until day looked like night, the wind rising with a violent voice, and the ocean answering with force. Waves climbed like moving mountains and crashed down without mercy, again and again, striking the ship from every side. The wood strained under pressure, ropes snapped loose, yet the structure groaned as if it knew it would not survive, and the men on board shouted instructions that no longer made sense because control had already slipped through their hands. There are moments in life when everything you relied on suddenly fails you, when skill is not enough, when strength is not enough, when experience is not enough. Lightning tore through the sky, revealing faces filled with fear, hands gripping anything they could hold, eyes searching for hope where there was none. And then darkness swallowed everything again. The storm did not pass quickly. It stayed, stretching across days with no sun, no stars, no sense of direction, just wind, waves, and waiting. Waiting without answers, waiting without clarity, waiting without knowing if there would even be a tomorrow. And yet, in the middle of that chaos, Paul stood differently. Not because he didn't feel the storm, not because he wasn't affected by the same wind and rain, but because something deeper held him steady. Before the storm ever rose, he had already received a word, a promise that his life would continue, that he would stand before rulers, that his assignment was not complete. And when a promise is placed over your life, it does not stop the storm from forming, but it does determine how the storm ends. Still, the storm grew worse, the waves more aggressive, the ship weaker with every impact, until the inevitable happened. A violent crack split through the vessel, the structure gave way, and the ship broke apart completely. In a moment, everything changed. They were no longer passengers. They were survivors fighting for their lives in an unforgiving sea. The water was cold, heavy, relentless. It pulled, it dragged, it resisted every attempt to stay above it. Men struggled to breathe, to keep their heads above the surface, to grab onto anything that could float. Broken wood became lifelines. Fragments of destruction became tools of survival. Some disappeared beneath the waves and fought their way back up, gasping for air, refusing to give in. It was chaos, pure and raw, and yet, in the middle of it, something unseen was at work. Because not one life was lost. Not one. In a storm designed to destroy, in a moment that should have ended many stories, everyone survived. That is not coincidence, that is covering. Eventually, the sea released them, and one by one they reached land, collapsing onto wet sand, their bodies shaking, their lungs pulling in air like it was the first time, too exhausted to celebrate, too overwhelmed to speak, but alive. The land was unfamiliar, quiet, almost watching them. This was Malta, not where they intended to go, not where they planned to be, but exactly where they needed to arrive, because sometimes survival is not just about escape, it is about redirection. They lay there trying to recover, trying to process what they had just survived, when they realized they were not alone. Figures stood at a distance watching closely, observing every movement. The islanders, cautious, careful, uncertain. Strangers arriving through disaster always raise questions before they receive kindness. The islanders approached slowly, studying them, measuring them, unsure of what they represented. They did not know their story, they did not know their journey, but they did something that mattered. They built a fire. A simple act, but a powerful one, because sometimes compassion shows up before understanding does. The fire began small, weak flames pushing against damp wood, struggling to stay alive, but slowly it grew, the crackling becoming stronger, the light pushing back the cold, the warmth spreading into the air. The survivors gathered around it, stretching their hands toward the heat, leaning closer, trying to bring life back into their bodies. And in that moment, when rest would have been understandable, when comfort would have been justified, Paul moved. Not toward ease, not toward recovery, but toward responsibility. He stepped away from the fire, into the cold ground, into the wet surroundings, into the aftermath of survival, and began gathering sticks. Because purpose does not wait for convenience. It does not wait for comfort. It does not wait until you feel strong again. It calls you even when you are still shaking. He bent down, picking up branches, wet, heavy, covered in dirt and water, his hands still weak, his body still tired, but he kept going because what is inside you does not pause when life becomes difficult. It continues. It pushes. It moves. He returned to the fire and dropped the sticks in, and the flames responded immediately, rising higher, burning stronger, reacting to what he had added. And then, without warning, something shifted. Inside the bundle of wood, hidden, silent, waiting, something alive revealed itself. A viper. It moved quickly, striking with precision, its fangs sinking into his hand and holding on. And in that instant, everything stopped. The fire continued to burn, but the moment froze. The islanders saw it clearly, and they understood exactly what it meant. This was not minor danger. This was death. Their expressions changed immediately, moving from curiosity to certainty. Whispers began to spread among them, quiet but confident. He must be guilty. He escaped the sea, but justice has found him. No one escapes what they deserve. Because in their understanding, events like this were not random, they were evidence. Evidence of wrongdoing, evidence of judgment. They did not see the storm as mercy. They saw the bite as justice. And now they watched. They watched his hand, they watched his face, they watched his body, waiting for the signs they expected, the swelling, the pain, the collapse. The air grew heavy, silent, stretching across the moment, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the slow, steady sound of a heartbeat. But Paul did not panic, and there was no fear in his expression, no urgency in his movement, no desperation in his reaction. He looked at the snake, calm, steady, composed, as if this moment did not carry the weight everyone else believed it did. And then, with one simple motion, he shook it off. No struggle, no hesitation, no drama. The snake fell into the fire and was consumed instantly. Gone. Just like that. Silence followed, thick and heavy, and then the waiting resumed. Because surely now the venom would work. Surely now the body would fail. Surely now the outcome they expected would unfold. But nothing happened. No swelling, no shaking, no weakness. He stood there exactly the same. Time passed, longer than it should have, longer than made sense, and still nothing changed. Confusion replaced certainty. This is not possible. This is not normal. Everything they believed was being challenged in real time. He should be dead, but he isn't. And slowly their perspective shifted. The man they had judged became the man they questioned. The one they labeled became the one they reconsidered. Not cursed, not condemned, but protected. And that leads back to the question, why would God allow the bite? Why not stop the snake from striking? Why not prevent the moment entirely? Why allow danger to come so close? Because sometimes God does not demonstrate his power by removing the attack, but by controlling the outcome. Sometimes the proof is not in what never touched you, but in what touched you and still failed. The storm was real, the shipwreck was real, the snake was real, but none of them had the authority to finish what God had not ended. Because purpose was still active, assignment was still in motion, and the word spoken over his life was still standing. Paul stood there unharmed, unchanged, unmoved. Not because life avoided him, but because life could not override what had already been decided. And this is the truth many people miss. Sometimes you will feel the pressure, sometimes you will face the storm, sometimes you will even experience the bite, but none of those things get the final say. So when life strikes unexpectedly, when something grabs hold of you, when it feels like everything is waiting for you to fall, remember this moment. He did not panic. He did not surrender. He did not accept the conclusion others had already written for him. He simply shook it off and kept standing. Because what is on you is never greater than what is with you. The fire burned lower, the flames settling into glowing embers, the island returning to quiet. But something had changed forever. A storm had passed, a bite had failed, and a truth had been revealed. That some lives are not preserved because they avoid danger, but because they are carried through it. A storm that could not drown him, a bite that could not kill him, and a God who remained present through it all.